He holds degrees in languages and philosophy from Xavier University. He served at Franciscan University of Steubenville for 13 years before joining the University of Dallas. He served as dean at Constantine College of the Liberal Arts and then as provost before he assumed his current position as the president of the University of Dallas. He is an active scholar, and his publications include 2 books, Before Virtue, Assessing Contemporary Virtue Ethics, and The Philosophical Legacy of Jorge Gracia. He is currently writing a book on virtue and education. He is the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Hildebrand Project and a member of Legatus and a fellow of the Dallas Institute for Humanities and Culture. Dr. Sanford is also an alumnus of our sister school, Trinity School at Green Lawn. He and his wife have 9 children and 4 grandchildren. It is a great honor to have Dr. Sanford with us this afternoon to give our commencement address. Dr. Sanford.
It really is a joy to be among you. Some of you old friends, I see the Brewers back there. I got to say hello to Mr. Bartek. My sister Liz is here with my nephew Paul and nieces Catherine and Claire and many others. Last night at the senior dinner, it was a joy to hear cryptically described, because they were brief addresses, summaries of the contributions that you graduates have made over your time at Trinity. And I want to thank Head of School Schmitz for this invitation to be among you. So, in particular, Trinity School at River Ridge class of 2024, I want to address these remarks to you. As you heard, I too am a graduate of Trinity School, and I should, before I really get going, say, Anna, you passed the test. Can't wait to have you on campus at the University of Dallas. So, 1993, that's when I graduated. That may seem like a long time ago to you. Doesn't seem that long ago to me. I count my formation at Trinity School at Green Lawn one of the great blessings of my life. I continue to build on the formation I received there daily, for it provided a foundation for what is proving to be a lifelong pursuit of truth, goodness, and beauty. And it continues to inspire my work as a professor and as a president. There's no need for me to dwell upon the details of the education that you and I both received, for you know it well. There are, however, some things that I have in which you lack with respect to our common inheritance from Trinity, simply due to the fact that I have had more than 30 years to continue to reflect on that education. And the distance of that stretch of time between now and then lends some advantages. Of course, I grant that you have some advantages when it comes to the immediacy of your Trinity education. For instance, if we paused right now and went and took your final exams for math or science, you would definitely outperform me. In any event, I would like to say a few things about what I've learned in the physical and temporal distance I've had from my Trinity education, how regular recourse to my Trinity education has continued to serve me well, and then to offer a few pointed reflections on 5 virtues I think you should be earnest to continue to cultivate. This, I assure you, will not be an exercise in reminiscence, but rather an effort to help ready you for what lies ahead. First, I learned after Trinity that I had been given some significant advantages over many of my collegiate peers. As I expect is the case with you, Trinity gave me plenty of opportunity to cultivate the virtue of humility. Grading was severe. Maybe it's lax these days, but back when I was a kid, grading was severe. And my teachers held no punches when it came to sharing exactly what they thought about my writing and general progress. Not only did all that critique improve me intellectually, it was enormously beneficial for my perseverance through later studies. I figured that most of my collegiate classmates would have come from much larger schools, but I did not appreciate what that meant with respect to the care taken by their teachers, or the lack thereof in some cases, to hone them as individual scholars. They were unused to criticism. And many of them, though very bright, were terrified of failure. I, on the other hand, like all of you no doubt, had had my pride wounded on many occasions. And there is great good to be gained from wounded pride. Misplaced pride, a false sense of self-importance, and an inflated sense of your own very personal, very unique excellence is the biggest impediment to a genuinely happy life. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but that does not make it false. I was prepared by Trinity to write a 4-page paper with a limited, specific, and unified thesis, and at least three supporting arguments with textual evidence in less than 2 hours. That's an important skill that is required. I was prepared to study Greek and Latin literature for 4 years, even though I had not yet studied even the Greek alphabet. That was thanks to the habits formed from studying Latin and French at Trinity. I was prepared to make new friends and attuned to cultivate friendships, especially with those who possessed qualities I admired and hoped to acquire myself. I was prepared to join and then captain the crew team, even though I had never rowed a scull. That was thanks to playing every available sport through every school year and discovering that I studied better when I had to schedule my time carefully to balance Trinity academics with athletics. But there were also some things I was unprepared for by Trinity. I was unprepared to be asked to join a drinking and pornography watching party hosted by my dorm floor's resident assistant on the very first night in my new dorm room. As I recall, the invitation interrupted me from reading Tolstoy's War and Peace. I'm grateful that I had the good moral sense to decline that invitation thanks to Trinity and my parents' formation, even if it pegged me as an oddball. I was unprepared for my university's campus ministry to be pushing pro-abortion literature. I was unprepared to be surrounded by a majority of classmates who were fully in the throes of the hookup culture and the constant peer pressure that suggested there was something wrong with me because I was not throwing myself into the hedonistic frenzy of collegiate life. I was unprepared to have a nun teaching me Holy Scripture who argued that it would make no difference if the Blessed Mother was not in fact overshadowed by the Holy Spirit and Jesus had an earthly father, since this professor heretically contended what Jesus really did was unlock the divinity in all of us, rather than come as the unique God-man he is. In point of fact, I was absolutely scandalized by these things and many more, especially because I was attending a Jesuit and therefore Catholic university. You should expect similar, unless you're going to the University of Dallas, you should expect similar, if not more severe, threats to what you have developed as a firm understanding of the way the world, and especially the moral universe, is supposed to be. Please know that the right response to those threats is not to abandon your hard-won moral formation to join the crowd. If nothing else, Trinity has taught you that the fact that the majority go in a particular direction does not make that direction correct. In point of fact, the direction of the majority is often down. You have been given an education that lifts you up. Trust in your education. With that lesson in mind, perhaps it's better to say, not that I was unprepared for those experiences, but rather I was naive. In fact, I was in many respects prepared for those surprises, as unexpected as they were. The scandals I experienced encouraged, in fact, a crisis of faith in me. I'd gone to a deeply Christian and ecumenical classical school, and as a result, was blessed with a well-formed conscience. I was also a Catholic. Is what I was seeing around me at the Catholic university I attended what Catholicism unmixed with other Christian influence was really like? I knew I should not go the way of so many of my collegiate classmates. Did that make me then not a Catholic? Thanks be to God, I remain a Catholic, indeed a strongly committed one, not in small part thanks to the faithful Christian witness of so many of my Trinity teachers, many of whom were not Catholic. I had learned through humane letters seminars not just how to analyze texts with care, but how to listen to others and determine if what they asserted was well-grounded. When I listened to my college classmates and some of my teachers, contradictions abounded. Most importantly, I had already tasted and seen that the Lord is good, and His commandments just and life-giving. I had already weighed Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, and Augustine's insistence that a man whose actions do not comport with his convictions is a most miserable creature. I'd begun to see with Aristotle that virtue is both rare and the noblest of self-possessions. I had begun to appreciate what our Lord meant when He said that the gate is narrow. There is no easy path to living well, no frictionless road to happiness in this life and the next. What I began to understand was that what I was witnessing in my early university experiences, and I don't want to be misunderstood to imply that all of those experiences were negative, but what I began to understand was that I was seeing a sort of disease. In fact, I discerned that this was the same disease I had learned that Adam and Eve succumbed to when I studied the book of Genesis at Trinity. It is the same disease that I learned Augustine warred against when I read his Confessions. It is the same disease that gripped Russia at the onset of the Soviet Empire, and it's the same disease that is gripping our broader culture in its headlong rush into a new paganism. It is the disease of pride, the sort of pride that motivated Lucifer to refuse to serve God. It is the pride of exalting worldly power above all else, and the pride that has led to an outbreak of radical assertions of self-will and a necessarily failed attempt to pursue a happiness of one's own making. When I was a Trinity student, I sometimes worried that the school was too small and too sheltered to prepare me and my classmates for the big world outside our campus. Television and summer work and athletic experiences tipped me off to some of the contours of that outer world, but I really didn't know it. What I eventually found was that the smallness of Trinity gave me an enormous advantage because it afforded outstanding teachers the freedom to pour their best into me and my classmates. They knew what I could not when I was a student at Trinity, that I would need everything they had to give to navigate a fallen world and find my personal mission. That personal mission, in addition to attempting to lay down my life for my wife, who's also a Trinity grad, and our children, has turned out to be one of service to the many students I've been able to teach, the faculty and staff I've been blessed to lead, and a fulsome dedication to ensure that the great Catholic liberal arts university I'm privileged to lead, the University of Dallas, unlike the university I attended in my youth and so many others, remains fully committed to what St. John Henry Cardinal Newman calls the idea of the university, and what St. John Paul II recognizes to have been born from the very heart of the Church, ex corde ecclesia. I have no idea what your personal mission is, but I do know that you have one. God has called you to great tasks. He's calling you even now to build up His kingdom here on earth. He's calling you to be faithful to the invaluable gift of the excellent classical education you have received and to put your life at the service of others and in submission to the good, true, and beautiful. Though no one but you and God, maybe not even you, know the specifics of your callings, there are common principles. Principles which are in fact virtues to which you and I and everyone in this room are called. I want to call your attention especially to 5 of these virtues. The first is gratitude. I hope you recognize that everything you have is a gift. Your life, your parents, your siblings, your friends, your teachers, your coaches, your faith, even your struggles, your pains, your toils, your hardships are gifts. Often our most important lessons come through failures and hardships. If that is, we have an eager spirit ready to learn. What do you do when someone gives you a gift? What do you think of it? And the greatest giver of gifts is God himself, the source of all that is good, true, and beautiful, and the redeemer of all our failures and sufferings. I encourage you to give thanks in all things, to cultivate the habit of a grateful spirit. This is what St. Paul exhorts us to do in 1 Thessalonians. Quote, "In all things give thanks, for this is the will of God through Jesus Christ for all of you." End quote. I guarantee that in heeding this command, you won't just be expressing your fidelity to the Word of God, you'll be far happier, and your life will be more readily felt as a gift to others. What your teachers have cultivated in you is what medieval thinkers called docilitas, the virtue of docility. Docility is derived from the Latin docere, which means to teach, and its nobility is captured well in some cognates, such as when we bestow the title of doctor on one who has achieved a great mastery of learning in a particular discipline. Every virtue, we know from Aristotle and Aquinas and others, makes its possessor good and enables him to perform his proper work well. Docility is that virtue which actualizes the potential learner in each of us. And it does so by disposing us to receive from those persons, works of art, symbolic utterances, literary artifacts, and indeed nature herself, the treasures they contain. Far from enslaving us to these teachers, docility enables us to realize that we can become free only by subjecting ourselves to those truths. What that means for a learner is that we absorb or assimilate, become measured by, or otherwise come to be one with the objects of our reflection. Knowing is a matter of becoming one with what one studies. You are what you know. That is, we become what we know according to our own proper mode of understanding. There is no learning without the virtue of a standing readiness to learn from others. Humans don't see for themselves with the all-seeing eyes of God. We see for ourselves only what we can directly encounter. But we have the benefit of being able to turn to others who have made sense of what they have encountered. This is where the notion of tradition, as in the Western intellectual tradition, has special relevance as holding forth for the learner those books, experiments, works of art, and other artifacts that are of central importance to their study. It is also the tradition that can provide some guidance to determining who, in fact, can be trusted as the contemporary conveyors of the tradition's treasures. Learning from the wise, and learning from the things the wise point us to, requires as well an educational environment, a culture conducive to study. Docility, the capacity of being taught, implies then not just the sheer capacity to learn, but the desire to learn. And in cultivating such a desire, one needs an environment in which one finds others who are similarly desirous. You've had that culture here at Trinity. And you know that such a culture and the many acts of learning that take place within it are best understood within the context of friendship. And you have indeed benefited tremendously from deep friendships, united in common purpose through your time here at Trinity. And I encourage you to continue to cultivate these friendships that you have with each other and with your teachers as you go forth from this academy. I also encourage you to seek and nurture the right sort of new friends, for it makes a tremendous difference with whom you spend your time and what sort of culture you contribute to. Find friends who share with you a desire to learn, who challenge you to be more virtuous, who encourage you to grow in your knowledge and love of God. I should pause for a moment and congratulate you. I don't think I've done that yet. This is, after all, an event orchestrated to celebrate your accomplishments. I do indeed congratulate you on them. It's right and proper to celebrate the not insignificant set of tasks that have culminated in your graduation from Trinity School. I congratulate you as well for a gift you did not earn, having parents with the wisdom to entrust your education to this school and who have been willing to make what I'm sure, for many of them, if not all, a significant sacrifice to pay for your education. I also want to congratulate you for having friends who encouraged you when you felt like there was no way you could pull together that essay on time, and who cheered for you even in your less than fully graceful moments in extracurricular activities. I want to congratulate you for having a God who loves you so much he created you with sufficient gifts to graduate. And even more blessed than that, who through his death and resurrection has called you into friendship with himself. You should see a familiar pattern here. What you have received. As I said before, all that you have is a gift, and that should humble you. Being humbled, however, is anything but crippling. Humility is not mere modesty, nor does it make you hold back from great ventures. St. Thomas Aquinas captures just the right entry point to making sense of the virtue of humility when he calls it the sister virtue of magnanimity. Magnanimity, megalopsukia, literally means great soul. This virtue is a matter of striving with the very seat of your deepest desire for great and glorious things. This is what constitutes the essence of magnanimity. How then is magnanimity compatible with humility? The essence of humility is acknowledging your gifts precisely as such. You can only do that by giving credit to the giver of your gifts. Therefore, with humility, one glorifies God as the gift giver. And just as in the parable of the talents, God is pleased when we use our gifts, he is most pleased when we use our gifts especially well. Therefore, with magnanimity, one strives to do great and glorious things that build up the kingdom, thereby pleasing the king through putting to use those talents he bestowed on you. So practice genuine humility, so you might thereby be truly magnanimous. The greatest challenge that lies before you is existential. Will you be the person, the man or woman God has called you to be? We can become our own obstacles to heeding that call by imagining ourselves to be independent agents, wholly responsible for our own successes, more or less self-made and free to do as we want. The truth, rather, is that free choice of the will is but an intermediate good. And to mistake it for full freedom is to fail to realize that whenever we willfully sever ourselves from the truth, we make ourselves but slaves. This is a point that St. Augustine makes most clearly in the second book of On Free Choice of the Will. We must serve the truth if we are to be free. One of the choicest fruits of a genuinely classical and liberating education is that you're able to think for yourself, that you've become an independent thinker. But it is not the case that you are free to make of your life whatever you will so that you can thereby flourish. That is simply not the case for the simple reason that each of us is already and irremediably enmeshed in a whole network of obligations which we have not voluntarily undertaken. Like it or not, each one of us does owe honor to our parents, gratitude to our teachers, help to our siblings, comfort to our friends, and religion to God. You do not have a choice in those matters. You can, of course, make choices that pretend as though you don't have those obligations, but that does not make them any less binding upon you. Let me explain a little what I mean by that. Consider that your mothers carried you to term and nursed you. Your fathers fed you with spoons or fingers. Both your parents changed your diapers and held your hand as you learned to walk. They and the many others they invited into your life as helpmates in raising you, like your teachers at Trinity, have indeed brought you to a point where you can more or less, hopefully more than less, take care of yourself. But the mark of real maturity is acknowledging that you are in fundamental relationship with others, and then exercising virtues that promote the flourishing of those others. Even during your most independent-seeming periods of life, we find ourselves still at every moment dependent on others for any variety of things, from the food you procure from the grocery to the streets you drive on and the books you read. Moreover, no great reflection is required to see you will, if you are fortunate enough to live to old age, once again be in need of someone to spoon feed you, to turn you over in bed, and to change your diapers. This focus on basic needs is not meant to shock, but to remind you that you are an animal. A wondrous, unique, and bound for heaven animal to be sure, but an animal nonetheless. Your body is not something you use for a bit before your true self departs. Rather, as the Christian tradition makes clear, and this is especially clear in Aquinas, you are your body. And a separated soul is just that, a soul that is so incomplete that it groans in anticipation of its resurrected body. It is this insight about our biological nature that puts the lie to the idea that you can, for instance, change your gender like you change your clothes. We are what we are. We are rational animals. But being rational means that we speak, and the things we speak about primarily have to do with the ways in which we live our lives together. And no one learns to speak unless taught to do so by others. So we are not just rational animals, we are what the contemporary philosopher Alistair McIntyre calls dependent rational animals. It is simply a fact that no living being can flourish except by being fully the sort of being it is. If you are to flourish, if you are to be truly successful, then you can only do so by acknowledging your dependency on others and caring for those who are dependent on you. We human beings need, in other words, if we are to be happy, conditional claim, to practice especially and above all those social virtues of acknowledged dependency. And foremost among them is the virtue of misericordia, of compassion, by which we not only suffer with those who suffer, but are compelled to relieve the suffering of those others. This sort of compassion is not pity, but rather an ingredient of real love, of charity, that motivates spiritual and corporeal works of mercy. In taking you through these philosophical reflections, and thanks for not falling fully asleep. Back awake, everyone. In taking you through these philosophical reflections, do not fear that I have forgotten the purpose of this address. Quite the contrary. My goal has been to reflect on where you have been in order to point you to where you are going. I have assumed you want to live happy and flourishing lives, both on earth and in heaven. I've been focusing on real happiness, not the cheap and fleeting stuff advertisers wave before your noses. You cannot achieve real flourishing, real happiness without exercising the virtue. And that takes planning, focus, prayer, practice, the whole of your energy, in fact, and continuous nurturing of the graces God bestows upon you. I have submitted for your consideration 5 virtues that I think are especially important for the next phases of your life. You'll have a quiz in just a minute before you receive your degree. Ready? Gratitude, docility, humility, magnanimity, and compassion. Each one of these virtues, rightly understood, is a particular perfection of the radically communal beings we are. I challenge you to foster more deeply each of these 5 virtues, building first and foremost on the fundamental disposition of gratitude, of giving thanks in all things. Your parents are rightly proud of you, as are your teachers. A significant milestone has been reached. But please don't think of graduating from Trinity as merely a hoop you have now jumped through so that you can get on with real life. Your life is one in which you must continue to build on what you have learned here. Remain docile to the truth as you explore new horizons. Be genuinely humble so that you can strive to do great things for the greater glory of God. Be magnanimous so that you inspire excellence in others and thus build up the kingdom of God. Dedicate yourself to a life of genuine compassion and charity. And in all things, whether good, bad, or ugly, Give thanks for the tremendous gift of your life, your talents, your family, your friends, this school, and the adventures that lie before.